few weeks away from the end of the semester at this point. So congratulations, first year students. You have almost made it through your first year at Illinois Tech and in the midst of the pandemic. Kudos to you. You are resilient and you've done an amazing job this year. My friends, today we have the final portion of our 3-part series all about intercultural communication. And Claire Johnson and Tyler Hardy, our international admissions staff, who are very well traveled, have lived abroad, and had all kinds of experiences with different cultures, are back with us again this week to finish up this discussion about communication across cultures. So Claire and Tyler will start, and then at the end, stick around because I do have some exciting announcements for you about upcoming seminars. So Claire and Tyler, whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Marky. Hi, everyone. So excited to be back with all of you for this 3rd week. I will preface this by saying my internet connection is a little wobbly today. So if I cut out and you miss something, just let me know and I can repeat it. But with that, we're going to jump into scales 7 and 8 from the Culture Map book to kind of wrap up all 8 of the scales. We'll have some time for discussion as a group, and then some final thoughts at the end to take away from this. So we'll get started then with scale 7. And this relates to disagreeing. So on our spectrum, you can see there that on one side we have confrontational versus avoids confrontation. So in certain cultures, it is customary for 2 people in an argument or disagreeing about something to be very upfront and confrontational about it. Open confrontation is appropriate, and it's actually considered to be positive for there to be disagreement and debate about a topic. Whereas in other cultures, many other cultures, they prefer to avoid confrontation, and it's seen as actually negative for the team to have open confrontation and disagreement, and to kind of hinder coming to a consensus. So you can see on our little scale there that the US does fall right smack dab in the middle, which is actually fascinating to think about. Many of the countries that avoid confrontation tend to be more on the eastern side of the world. And then we do see that places such as Germany, Russia, and Israel are more accustomed to having disagreement and debate and see it as a positive towards coming to an agreement or a consensus. So to provide some more insight on this, we do have an example, an excerpt from the book here that I'll read pretty quickly, but this does compare between France and Japan. So consequently, French business people intuitively conduct meetings in this fashion, viewing conflict and dissonance as bringing hidden contradictions to light and stimulating fresh thinking. We make our points passionately. We like to disagree openly. We like to say things that shock. With confrontation, you reach excellence, you have more creativity, and you eliminate risk. So that right there is fascinating. They see disagreeing and conflict as a way to really show how you're feeling and the passion behind your points. And they feel that it does help to reach a decision that is going to be beneficial for the group. So clearly France falls on the confrontational side of the disagreeing scale, whereas Japan is on the side that favors avoiding confrontation. So to begin to assess where your own culture falls on this scale, ask yourself the question, if someone in my culture disagrees strongly with my idea, does that suggest they're disapproving of me or just of the idea? In many confrontational cultures, it is quite natural to attack someone's opinion without attacking that person. Whereas in avoid confrontation societies, these 2 things are interconnected. So think about yourself. If someone's disagreeing with you, do you tend to be someone who takes it personally and sort of connects the opinion with yourself as a person, or do you see it as separate and aren't personally taken aback by someone disagreeing or bringing up confrontation with you? Any thoughts to share on that, or just how you personally feel about it? I know for me, I'm an avoid confrontation person by far. And I would much rather go about things or disagree with someone in a way that doesn't inspire passion behind the words and is moderate, and then coming to a consensus as quickly as possible, because I do not want to deal with a difficult confrontational situation. I see we have someone in the chat. Lucy reminds me of what my studio professors remind us of, that the feedback on our work isn't connected to our worth as a person. That is so true. That's a good point, Lucy. If you are working with other people and they're more confrontational, it can help to remember that what they're saying is not bringing down you as a person, and is in no way connected with how you're acting. It's just they're a little bit more passionate and interested in debating a topic. And you're definitely anti-confrontational. Yeah, I think a lot of us are. It may be a Midwest thing too. I know that compared to the East Coast, people in the Midwest tend to beat around the bush a little bit more and kind of avoid directly taking on someone who may disagree. Whereas East Coast, I think they're a little bit more bold. So I think that's Marky posting in the Illinois Tech visit name. I used to avoid confrontation at all costs, but I've realized that confrontation doesn't have to be negative. If you understand how to communicate that these issues are not connected to the person, sometimes it's necessary to confrontation to move forward. That's a really good point as well. And I think that's how more confrontational cultures view it. They see it as a good way to come to a consensus and really communicate fruitfully. I see that Ford, as long as it's done properly, that's a good point too. There's definitely a way to be confrontational that is not productive and is only going to inspire others to not want to share their thoughts. Whereas you can also be confrontational in a polite way too.
Mm-hmm. It depends on your environment again, and how you're choosing to confront, what kind of cultures you're interacting with. And I think that goes into the culture map in the book, just adapting or learning from other people's styles and disagreeing and whatever else they do in leading.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point to add in, Tyler, to further clarify. And with that, I think to make sure we don't run out of time this week, I'll pass it on to Tyler for our last scale.
All right. And our last one, I think, is probably one of the easiest ones to understand. So the scale is focused on scheduling, on linear time and flexible time. So with linear time, it's focused on the deadline and sticking to the schedule. Promptness is important. With flexible time, they focus on tasks that can be changed up as opportunities come up and interruptions are acceptable. They're able to deal with those interruptions and sort of adapt on the fly. So you can see right here, the linear time on the end is Germany, Switzerland, Japan, Sweden. Once you get to the flexible time zone, it goes to Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Kenya, where maybe it's okay if you show up 30 minutes to an hour past a set time, because that is the cultural norm, and because it's to be expected. So again, this really depends on where you're living, who you're working with, and how you kind of address scheduling conflicts or scheduling issues between different kinds of people. So yeah, I have a little example on this next slide here that we'll read from the culture map. So scheduling from culture to culture. This focuses on the difference between, I guess, the Brazilian interpretation of time and the American interpretation of time. As a child in Brazil, I learned from my mother that when invited to dinner, it is inappropriate to arrive at the time the host has asked you to come. Doing so will ultimately end with the host running frantically around the house to put things in order and will cause unnecessary stress for everyone. The best time to arrive is 15 minutes after the stated time or later, so the host will be ready and relaxed, and everyone will enjoy the evening. I will never forget the first time, as a young manager, I was invited to my American boss's house for dinner. My boss and his wife invited me, as well as 4 other members of my team, for a 6 p.m., and I carefully arrived at 6:35. What happened? The worried host asked as they opened the door. Did you get lost or stuck in traffic? Everyone was waiting for me and the table was already set. What a humiliation. So reading this, you can kind of see how it can be kind of important to really adapt to the scheduling of your work culture and your work setting. Because this Brazilian that was working in America uh, wasn't quite used to the more linear time required. But if they were to just adapt slightly, they would have that better sort of relationship and develop that trust better. Um, has anyone noticed certain differences in like friends arriving on time, or just differences in scheduling between you and other people, and how you've been able to address those?
Definitely drop this one in the chat. I know I've had
Hmm.
some personal experiences with scheduling differences. One of my best friends is from Spain, and so her concept of time is very different than mine, tends to be very fluid. And if we set a time to meet, like she might arrive early, she might arrive late, I never really know. And I just kind of have to be okay with that because that's just much more culturally acceptable in Spain.
Hmm. Yep, yep. It's something you have to be okay with because they're living there right now. We're over here. It just, yeah, it depends. Um, I see from Lucy, one of my friends is always late to things and she calls it Indian Standard Time. Yeah, so I'm guessing India would fall more on the flexible time on that scale, especially if you compare it to American culture. Again, it's not a one size fits all, but it's good if you're looking at general trends. Um, and then I saw another about I intentionally tell certain friends to drive at 1 p.m. when I want them to be there at 3 p.m. Yep, I do the same exact thing. There's so, some friends that are operating on a more flexible time schedules, so you have to adapt to them, which is you'll learn how to do that in the workplace and with school. So I think that's some really good insight. These comments are really great. Let's see here. I think we can move on soon, but I appreciate all the comments here. I see Lucy, we call it Filipino time. I would always leave for a gathering 30 minutes late when studying in South America. So yeah, no, thanks for all this feedback.
Yeah, I loved all the comments too. And I think we've all encountered it to some extent where always later we're the one who expects everyone to be on time, and then we have to adjust our expectations. But it is funny how we view time and scheduling so different. And now I know the screen says breakout rooms, but I think we're just going to stay together as a big group for this next part of the discussion. And we put a few scenarios here on the screen, just thinking about, if you are working in a company or if you're in a club or organization and you encounter a certain type of situation, how would you go about it? So I'll give everyone a chance to read through one of these. You can choose either deadlines or in time or giving feedback. And then after thinking about it and mulling the points here, maybe going ahead and either sharing in the chat box or unmuting yourself to discuss how you would work through that situation. So go ahead and read, and then feel free to share.
Claire, as everyone's reading, it may be helpful to give a quick reminder of high context versus low context societies.
Yeah, thanks, Marky. I was actually just thinking about that when I saw that there. So high context, if you remember, is a society where you do have to have a deep background and familiarity with that society in order to really understand what someone is trying to relate, how they're communicating. Whereas low context is there's information is portrayed in a very straightforward and direct way. So you don't have to have as much background and knowledge of that situation or culture to understand what's going on. If you remember from the example that we shared in regards to this, a high context society, Japan is an example of one of those. And to them, listening to the air is very important to be able to communicate properly and fully understand a situation.
Basically, reading between the lines is what takes place in a high context society. And remember, the US is the most low context country according to that scale as well. So just interesting to note.
All right, we've got some great comments coming into the chat now, Tyler and Claire.
So I see we have one from Lucy here. I think I would start by having a conversation with them at the next meeting to see why they're always late. And then depending on their answers, I would work to come up with a solution that benefits both of us. I think that's a great way to go about it, by not just saying nothing and then becoming more and more aggravated, and then weeks go by and there's no resolution. So I think it's very smart to just sit down with that person and discuss what's going on and hear from their side, and then work to a solution that works for both of you. So thank you for sharing. Humberto, correct way to do it is to talk to them and see how they view scheduling and possibly adjust the schedule. Yep, I think that's similar to Lucy's answer, in that it's having the conversation is what's key here. And when we don't have the conversation, that's where it leads to continued misunderstandings and the situation becoming even more frustrating and even worse, potentially for both sides. Because it could very well be that not only you, but also the other person in your group is frustrated. And if no one sits down to talk about it, you won't be able to work it out. And then from Henry, important to clarify what the other responsibilities people have on their calendars. Is it all right for the meeting to run a few minutes late, or does a participant have another obligation? Is someone coming from another meeting or class right before? I think being open and honest about these will help generate shared respect when it comes to expectations and flexibility. I think that's so true too. You know, we're all busy people, and just because I'm ready to go at a certain time doesn't mean everyone else is going to be as available then. So I love that suggestion, as well as just really coming to a point of clarity about what everyone is juggling right now on their schedules.
That's 100% accurate. I think that sometimes there's this misconception, and Tyler and Claire, feel free to correct me if you disagree, or anybody in the room right now. But sometimes I think that people view being culturally responsive and culturally sensitive as you just have to accept everything that everyone does and just be okay with it. But in reality, you know, we live in a highly global society where cultures are constantly mixing in the workplace, mixing in social situations. And so I think the whole point of being culturally sensitive is to just be aware that these differences exist, and to understand that communication is key, you know, in order to be able to reach an agreement and move forward in every situation. You know, just because you're working with someone from a different country who has a different concept of time doesn't mean that you just have to be okay with them constantly being late. It just means that you need to recognize that it's not a purposeful, disrespectful thing, and you need to be able to have that conversation. And I think that's where the value of these kinds of seminars really come in.
Yes, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head, Marky. It's all about that communication and not jumping to conclusions when someone is doing something differently than you, whether that's being late, being on time, disagreeing in a confrontational way, whatever it might be. It's not a personal attack, but it is important to take the time to talk to that person, hear where they're coming from, step inside their shoes, and then move forward from there.
Now, I know we didn't see any responses to the giving feedback scenario, and I'm really interested in this one because I think high context versus low context is a concept that a lot of people really aren't familiar with. And like I said, I used to see it a lot in student writing whenever students from various cultures, that were more high context societies would write and not necessarily provide the level of evidence and example and details that we see in the US. So I want to open it up to the room and ask again specifically about the giving feedback scenario. So we know that if it's a low context society, that's where we're being very direct, we're including examples. So how do you think that you would approach a conversation with a team about not hitting monthly targets in a low context society? So everyone feel free to drop that into the chat, or unmute yourself.
I think to get people maybe thinking and sharing ideas, it's important to remember with low context society that it's the most important person in the room is often not the person speaking, but the person who's listening. So just take that into consideration. If you're overseeing a group of people who are more comfortable with a low context setting, perhaps opening up the floor to listen to what they have to say is better than telling them you should be hitting these targets. So hopefully that gets some thoughts rolling.
Mm-hmm.
I see a response from Christian here. When it comes to low context society, I think including as many details as possible will be important, as well as allowing both parties to explain themselves. Feedback can come in conversation rather than talking at someone. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's the main thing for low context societies. You really have to be really, really clear. I think as Americans, we really like clarity, and just knowing upfront, what this means and why it's important, as opposed to having to read between the lines. So just, yeah, depending on the society and where you are, you'll kind of have to change and adapt.
I like the point there that Margie threw into two very different approaches, and it's so true. I think no matter what context you're in, whether you're a high context society or a low context society, and what you're more comfortable with, everyone appreciates being spoken to as if they are an equal and their feedback is important versus being told to do something and talked at.
Any other thoughts, friends? I mean, how would you maybe flip that, I suppose, for a high context society?
I'll give an example here, or an idea here. I think one thing with high context society is that a lot of the times it's very homogenous. So it's very culturally homogenous in a lot of ways. So if you're coming from a low context society, it may be good to take the time to just observe how your coworkers are interacting and what it means, I guess, asking questions. Obviously, just to get to know what they're doing and what that means, so you can get an understanding as to what their traditions or what they're doing means to them, when you can't really tell just from watching them. So just taking the time to observe and talking with them and seeing why they're doing what they're doing, I think is the main thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to keep in mind, Tyler. And I see we only have 5 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to move us along to our wrap up, because I do want to make sure that we, tie a bow on these last 3 weeks and present it in a nice way. So wrap up and final thoughts. We did just want to reiterate this slide here to list out all the scales as a reminder of everything we've gone over the past 3 weeks. So communication, evaluating, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, scheduling, and persuading make up the 8 scales. And then again, it is all relative. So just because one country may be low context compared to another country, they could actually really be high context compared to a different country. And then again, within that, there's going to be differences from person to person. It's not to say that every person from this country is going to act or believe or do everything in this particular way. So I, again, would recommend all of you to read the culture map for yourself, just to be able to delve more deeply in this. But hopefully these past few weeks have given you a greater understanding of all of these scales. And then what's next? So, what's the point of going through this information? We hope that now that you're aware of these 8 scales, you can better communicate when working together with your peers, whether that is here at Illinois Tech throughout your studies or going forward in your professional career. And when disagreements or challenges do arise, because they most definitely will, you'll know to take a step back and try to view the situation from the other person's perspective and think, well, just because I have this mindset about scheduling, for example, what does the other person actually think about it? And then, as all of you have already been so great about discussing, just taking the time to communicate with that person or those other people and really understand where they're coming from. Explaining your personal mindset as well and thought process is a really great way to help diffuse the situation and then make your peers feel comfortable to explain their perspective. Because again, as Marky said, you don't have to just accept what someone else is or believes or how they operate. It's also important to explain where you're coming from personally. And then by you doing that, the other, whomever you're working with, may also feel more at ease to share their perspective. So this will hopefully lay a foundation for stronger teamwork going.
Well, Tyler and Claire, thank you so much for being here the last couple of weeks and sharing all this knowledge on intercultural communication. And if any of you are interested in learning more about other cultures, there are tons of opportunities on campus to do that. There is an English Speak conversation group that happens every few weeks to assist some of our language learners on campus and just getting comfortable conversing in English. That's a great way to interact with the international community. In addition to that, if you're ever interested in just having conversations about travel, about, spending time in other places, Tyler and Claire are around. They work for the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. And also, this pandemic is not going to be a thing forever. And as first-year students, this is really the perfect time to start thinking about studying abroad, if that's something you're interested in, because typically the further along that you get in school, it gets a little bit more difficult to study abroad. And so, that's something that you want to plan for early, in your first couple of years of college. So if this is exciting to you, definitely think about that and reach out to the study abroad office. I do have, I see Claire and Tyler dropped their emails into the chat box, and I really appreciate that, so that you can reach out. And then friends, I just have a few announcements for you. So moving through these pretty quickly so that you can move on to the rest of your day. Just keeping in mind that definitely check out the Office of Campus Life calendar. There are weekly emails going out from welcome desk at iit.edu that are talking about all the things going on campus. Our new director of campus life is doing an amazing job of making sure the student body is aware of all these wonderful things going on. So definitely make sure that welcome desk at iit.edu is added to your address book and your safe contacts so that you're getting those emails. Also, the really cool thing about the Office of Campus Life calendar is you can actually add it to your own Google Calendar so that you can just always see the events that are occurring. Here's a snapshot of some of the things that are going on this week. So if you're interested, definitely check your email for that information or go to the Office of Campus Life website. In addition, friends, I wanted to go ahead and drop some specific dates for you, showing the spring topics that you actually voted on through the first year experience survey recently. So next Tuesday, March 30th, we're going to be doing a whole seminar about building your robust college experience as a first year student. And this is going to range all the way from ways to get involved on campus, also to things to do in the city, things to do, things to see, things to eat in the city. We're going to have restaurant recommendations for you, recommendations for things to do, and also things to do on campus. So this one should really be a lot of fun. Definitely join us for it. Then starting in April, we have a 3-part series all about career readiness. You can see on Tuesday, April 6th, we'll have one that's all about finding major related career experiences and leadership experiences as an undergraduate student, followed on Tuesday, April 13th by one all about professional networking, both virtual and in person, given the current situation that we're in with the pandemic. And then on Tuesday, April 20th, we'll have a full-scale resume workshop that gives you very real, very workable tips and tricks for your resume that you can start working on right now as a first-year student. So don't miss those. And then finally, the last seminar that we will have for the year is all about financial literacy. So we'll talk about salary negotiation, we'll talk about budgeting, investing, and also planning for retirement, because believe it or not, that's something that you do have to start thinking about pretty much immediately when you enter the workforce. So Victoria Rill from our Human Resources Department will be here with us for that one. So I hope to see all of you and additional people at these upcoming seminars, because these were the things that you as a first-year class voted on. So like I said, join us next time for our seminar all about customizing your college experience through involvement, attending events, and fun in the city. And we certainly hope to see you then. So that's all I've got for you, friends. If you need anything at all, reach out to your mentors, reach out to myself. My contact information is right here on the screen. Thank you so much for being here today, and enjoy the rest of your day, friends. That's all we've got. Bye, everybody.